She was rejected, forgotten, until the most dangerous alpha claimed her. But can love survive the secrets of Blackthorn Keep? Follow and subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. What do you think of Lyra and Arden's story so far? Should she truly trust the alpha who saved her, or keep her guard up? Tell me in the comments, and let me know what you'd like to see in the next episodes. The rusted cuffs around Lyra Morningsong's wrists had eaten into her skin long ago, but she had stopped caring. Pain was an old companion, one she wore like a second skin. She stood on the splintered platform in the center of Ashenford's trade square, head bowed, watching shadows of buyers drift across the packed earth. "Next lot," the auctioneer barked, voice cutting sharp through the autumn air. "Female, 21, trained for housework, literate." A calloused hand jerked her chin up. Teeth fine, limbs intact, a touch underfed, but she'll fatten with steady meals. Laughter rippled from the crowd. Heat flared in Lyra's cheeks, but she did not resist. Resistance only earned beatings. She had learned that the day raiders burned her village, the strong were slain, the weak were sold. She somehow fell in between. "Starting bid 50 silver, the auctioneer called. Silence stretched long. Too thin, too plain, too broken by hunger. 30, he tried again, his voice faltering. A few men stepped forward, appraising her like a mule. Their eyes were cold and transactional. Kitchen slave, field drudge, something disposable. "She's a trained herbalist," the auctioneer added desperately. "Knows her remedies, bone-setting, birthing work." Mocking laughter cut him off. "Who needs herbs when claws mend faster?" someone jeered. "Useless," shouted another. 20 silver, a gravel voice said. Lyra's stomach dropped. The man stepping forward was scarred, yellow-toothed, with hands that looked as if they'd broken more bones than they'd ever healed. His gaze promised a life of toil, bruises, and quiet despair. 20 silver from Brannock, the auctioneer sighed in relief. "Any advance?" 15, Brannock snarled. "She's half dead already. Lucky if she sees winter." The auctioneer hesitated, but the truth was plain. No one else wanted her. Lyra closed her eyes, whispering inwardly to her wolf spirit, buried deep by months of starvation. Stay quiet. Survive. At least survive, But then, a hush rippled across the square, sudden as a storm. Conversations faltered. Even children ceased their cries. The air itself seemed to thicken, charged with raw authority that made bones ache. "My sovereign," someone whispered, kneeling. Lyra dared a glance. The crowd parted as a figure moved through with predatory ease, each step commanding silence. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair framing a face hewn from stone. His amber gaze swept the square. Power radiated from him like fire from a forge. "The High Alpha," someone breathed. 100 gold. The voice was deep, final, carrying across the square like a blade of sound. Lyra's heart lurched. What could such a man want with her? The auctioneer stammered. "My lord, are you certain? You doubt your sovereign's word." The High Alpha's voice was cold enough to frost the air. Brannock's face drained of color. "My lord, I had first claim." "You had nothing." Golden eyes cut him down. "Leave. Now." The brute stumbled away, his bravado scattering like ash in wind. The Alpha stepped onto the platform. Up close, Lyra felt the force rolling off him. Strength, yes, but something more primal. His gaze pinned her, unreadable. "You are a healer." The question startled her. Of all things, this. "Yes, my lord," she whispered. "Trained by the Willowfen elders." herbs, bones, childbirth. For the first time in months, a spark of fragile hope fluttered in her chest. Good, he said simply, then turned away. Rowan. Take her to the fortress. Feed her. Clean her. A massive warrior appeared, his face scarred into impassivity. He gripped her shoulder hard. Rule 1. You speak to the High Alpha only if he speaks to you. Rule 2. Never meet his eyes. You are property now. Valuable property, but property all the same. The word struck like a blow. But at least she was not bound to Brannock's cruelty. At least she lived. As she was led away, Lyra dared one last glance at the High Alpha's retreating form. He had not saved her out of kindness, she was sure. Yet he had saved her all the same. And if he wanted a healer, she would be the best he had ever seen. Her survival depended on it. The journey to the Alpha's stronghold stretched like a punishment carved into the mountains themselves. Lyra's bare feet, cracked and bleeding, slipped on the sharp shale of the winding trail. Around her, the High Alpha's warriors moved with effortless grace, some padding in wolf form before shifting back into broad-shouldered men as the terrain demanded. She hadn't shifted in months. Hunger and fear had driven her wolf deep into hiding, a silent echo she could hardly sense anymore. Her captors smelled it on her. Weakness, emptiness. Useless Omega, one muttered under his breath. The insult drew snickers from the others. King wasted his coin, another said. Should have let the vultures finish her. The words struck sharper than the rocks beneath her feet. These were the Alpha's own men. If they scorned her, what did that say of his judgment in buying her? Maybe she's not meant to shift, Rowan's gruff voice broke through. His scarred face showed nothing, but for a heartbeat Lyra thought she heard something like defense in his tone. Oh, and what's she meant for? A warrior sneered. Mixing salves for pups too soft to stomach pain. Their laughter was coarse and cutting. Lyra clenched her jaw. Her training had taught her patience, not pride, but even patience had edges. By the third day, her body failed her completely. The world tilted, her knees buckled, and she crumpled into the dust. Mocking voices rose around her like vultures circling. Knew she wouldn't last, one scoffed. Leave her. She'll only slow us. Through the haze of exhaustion, Lyra braced for the boot or the shove that always followed collapse. But none came. Instead, she felt herself lifted, arms strong yet careful cradling her against a chest that smelled of pine resin and storm wind. Her wolf stirred, weak but alive, at the scent. Through blurred vision, she realized who carried her. The High Alpha himself. He bore her as if she weighed nothing, his massive frame steady, his grip adjusting with surprising gentleness to keep her from jostling. He didn't speak, didn't look down, but the air shifted. The jeers of the warriors died to silence. The mountain path narrowed. Fog thickened, revealing shadows of a fortress carved straight from black stone, its towers jutting skyward like talons. Blackthorn Keep was no home. It was a weapon built of rock and iron. Inside the gates, warriors drilled with merciless precision. Children sparred with wooden blades, their faces already sharpened into masks of discipline. No laughter, no play. Only a constant hum of restrained violence. Lyra's heart clenched. She had thought she'd known bleakness in the slave camps. But this place, this fortress, felt like a land where joy had been exiled. The Alpha set her down gently in the courtyard, then motioned to a stern-faced woman with silver-threaded hair. Take her. Feed her. Make her presentable, he said, already turning away. Before the woman could lead Lyra off, a voice slid across the stones, smooth as honey and twice as dangerous. Welcome back, nephew. A tall man approached, so like the high alpha they could have been brothers, but older, his features carved by cruelty, his pale eyes sharp with disdain. Even in these first moments, Lyra sensed the undercurrent of ambition that would later prove deadly. His gaze skimmed over Lyra as though she were filth clinging to a boot. "Is this the healer you purchased?" "It is, Uncle Kaelric," the alpha replied. His voice edged with quiet warning. "You carried her here. Before the pack. They will whisper." Lyra's stomach knotted. She understood then. In this place, her presence was not salvation but scandal. "Here," said the stern woman with silver-threaded hair, pressing a slate token into Lyra's palm. A thorn branch was scratched onto one side. The other bore a number. "You answer to 72 until the alpha pardons you to a proper rank. I am Matron Eloan. Do what I say and you will keep skin on your back and breath in your lungs." They stripped the iron cuffs and replaced them with woven leather bands that bit less but declared ownership more elegantly. Lyra was marched through a warren of stone corridors where torches hissed as if the walls themselves were perpetually damp with a mountain's breath. Doors opened into rooms arranged with military neatness. Armory, kitchens, tack room, antechapel, the Hall of Oaths with its black standard embroidered in silver thorns. "3 rules," Eloan said as she led Lyra down a spiral stair toward the lower keep. "Rule 1. You do not address the High Alpha unless he speaks to you. Rule 2. No one unsummoned crosses the east wing after moonrise. Rule 3. Never, under any circumstance, open a door if the air on the other side smells wrong." Lyra nearly stumbled. "Smells wrong." Eloan cut her a sideways look. "You're a healer. Trust your nose." They reached a long room of stone and cedar that might have been comforting if not for the iron rings set into the floor. An inner door opened into the infirmary. Narrow cots, white-tiled basins, shelves lined with glass jars of roots and resin. The scent here was familiar. Willow bark, comfrey, bare fat rendered clean. Comfort threaded itself through a needle of dread and stitched itself to Lyra's ribs. "Eloan!" A young man popped up from behind a stack of linens. His hair was the color of barley and his smile arrived before the rest of him, like a hopeful messenger. "Is that our new helper?" "Joss," Eloan said. "Mind your hands and your curiosity. This is..." She hesitated, looked at Lyra's token. 72. "Awful name," Joss said cheerfully, then winced when Eloan's brows rose. "Sorry. Welcome anyway. I run stitches and clean instruments and complain dramatically when I'm sent to fetch snowmelt at dawn." Another figure appeared, a woman about Lyra's age with a braid black as a raven's wing and ink stains on her fingers. "Mira," she said curtly, nodding. "I keep the herb store and the records. If you move my labels, I'll know." Lyra exhaled. Work, supplies, tasks with edges. She could stand inside this. "I won't move your labels," she promised. Days blended into routine. Dawn brought the clang of steel in training yards, the low rumble of council voices, the way mountain fog curled like a living thing along the outer walls before sun burned it away. The infirmary quickened at odd hours. Sparring accidents, frost-bitten fingers, 2 ambitious cubs with wooden sword bruises. Lyra learned to read the keep's rhythms through small injuries and careful observations. She catalogued the soldiers by their wounds. Sable, the tracker with a scar like a white thread at her temple. Kerr, who enthused about swordplay and fainted at the sight of his own blood. Old Noel, who claimed 70 winters and hid warm bread in his cloak for the cubs. The alpha, Arden Vaelor, remained a distant figure. She saw him only in glimpses, striding through the courtyard, speaking low to Rowan, or standing on the parapets, his hair and cloak whipped by wind. But sometimes when treating the wounded, she would catch fragments of conversation about border troubles, about someone named Reed who grows bold in the southern valleys, about missing scouts who might have found more than they bargained for. The name Reed began to surface more frequently, always in hushed tones, always followed by worried glances. Lyra stored these fragments like herbs in labeled jars, sensing that understanding this threat might be crucial to survival. A young warrior was carried into the infirmary, blood pouring from a wound that stretched jagged across his chest. He had been foolish in sparring, lunging without guard. The healers scrambled, but panic frayed their precision. Lyra's hands moved before thought could catch up. She seized the yarrow and comfrey, ground them into a paste, and pressed it into the wound with steady fingers. She bound the gash tightly, ignoring the warrior's groans. "Boil water," she commanded Joss, who gawked at her before sprinting. "Mira, more cloth." For long minutes the room was chaos. Then silence. The bleeding slowed. The warrior's breathing steadied. He would live. "So," Eloan said quietly, watching Lyra lean back breathless. Perhaps not useless after all. That evening brought an unexpected summons. Rowan appeared at the infirmary door. "The Alpha requests your presence," he said simply. "Alone." Lyra's pulse quickened. Arden Vaelor had not spoken directly to her since the auction. She followed Rowan through winding passages to a small chamber lined with maps and ledgers. The Alpha stood with his back to the door, studying a chart marked with red ink. Danger zones, she realized. "Your work today," he said without turning. "The warrior you saved." "I did what any healer would do, my lord." He faced her then, and she saw something in his amber eyes she hadn't expected. Approval mixed with something deeper. "Most healers in my service would have waited for Eloan's permission. You acted." Lyra kept her gaze lowered, remembering Rowan's second rule. The wound was severe. There was no time. "No," Arden agreed. "There rarely is." He moved to the map, pointing to several marked locations. "Reed's men have been testing our borders. Scouts report movement near Wavetop Ridge. If they move against us, I'll need someone who acts without permission when lives hang in the balance." The weight of his words settled over her like a cloak. This was more than acknowledgement. It was trust, fragile and dangerous. "I won't fail you, my lord." For a moment silence held them. Then he turned away. "See that you don't." The keep was never truly quiet. Even at night, when torches guttered and most of the pack slept, the mountain groaned and sighed as though the stone itself kept vigil. Lyra learned to read the language of that silence. The clink of chains from the kennels, the muffled thud of boots changing watch, the low, throaty howl of wolves on patrol, and sometimes the wrong silence. That silence lived in the East Wing. One morning, while carrying a basket of fresh linens, Lyra found herself again at the border where the torchlight shifted. She froze, remembering Rowan's warning about becoming a story. Her wolf stirred uneasily, a faint whimper at the edge of her consciousness. The air beyond the archway smelled sharp and metallic, like blood spilled on stone long ago and left to rot. Before she could retreat, a voice slid into the hall. "You're curious." Lyra turned sharply. Caelric, the Alpha's uncle, leaned against a column, his pale eyes gleaming with amusement. In daylight, his resemblance to Arden was stronger, but where the Alpha's features held storm and strength, Caelric's held calculation. She bowed her head quickly. "Forgive me, my lord. I was only passing." "Passing?" His smile did not reach his eyes. "You hovered. You listened. You wondered what secrets Arden guards so carefully." Lyra's pulse skittered. "I meant no harm." "I'm sure you didn't." His voice was smooth as oil, but it dripped with something colder. "But harm often comes from those who mean none. The East Wing holds dangers my nephew is too young to properly contain. Perhaps someone more experienced, should be trusted with such responsibilities. He stepped closer and she caught the faintest whiff of something, clove and ash. The scent made her wolf recoil. "Stay away from what is not yours," he murmured, "or you may find yourself silenced sooner than you think." Then, as quickly as he'd appeared, he vanished into the shadows. That evening, when Lyra returned to the infirmary, Mira eyed her pale face. "Kaelric spoke to you." "It wasn't a question." Lyra nodded. "He warns everyone," Joss whispered, glancing around nervously. "Usually just before something unfortunate happens to them." The words sent ice through Lyra's veins. She thought of the Alpha's trust, of the maps marked with Reed's movements, of her precarious place in this deadly game of power. Snow came in veils that evening, not a storm so much as a steady forgetting of the world's edges. Lyra was shelving jars when Rowan shouldered through the door with urgency written in every line of his body. "Pack a field satchel," he said. "We're short a healer for the North Run." Mira silently pushed Lyra a leather pouch and began dropping in essentials. Yarrow, comfrey, pine pitch, bear fat, willow bark, a bone needle, and the small copper kettle. "You keep your eyes on wounds and your feet behind Rowan," she said, fastening the flap. "If you see something that looks like a cliff, it is. If you smell something wrong, it is. If the Alpha says run, you'll discover you can." They crossed the yard under a sky the color of tarnished pewter. Wolves paced the gate's shadow, pupils wide against gathering dusk. Outside the walls, the valley breathed winter through its teeth. The forest held its breath while the patrol fanned into lines that threaded between firs and over wind-polished stone. Arden Vaelor ran point. He wore no cloak. Snow caught in his hair like an argument he wouldn't dignify. When he paused, the line paused. When he lifted his face to the wind, the night seemed to lean closer, listening for orders. They crested Wave-Top Ridge, and the wind brought wrong scents, metallic sweetness like a blade licked too long. Lyra smelled it first, her healer's training making her sensitive to the corruption of blood and pain. Rowan's hand fell back, palm open. "Stop," and she obeyed. Arden lifted 2 fingers. The patrol flowed to a halt with the grace of a single animal that had learned many feet. A shape lay ahead, half buried by snow. A snare, teeth iron-bright, jaw sprung around a thread of red scarf. Wolf prints chewed the ground to ice. Human boot prints too, coming and going. "Reed's men," Rowan said low. "Getting bolder." The patrol ghosted forward. Voices came back in the wind's pocket. Too loud, too certain. Human men, 3 at least. And then a sound Lyra had not heard since the day raiders took her. A young wolf's yelp that ended in nothing. She moved before her caution could catch up. Rowan's hand caught her sleeve, but lightly. "At my shoulder," he said. They slipped along the ridge's edge to where the gully below held the mess. Snare lines, jaws sprung around empty air and living flesh. A young grey was trapped, while 2 men in patched coats argued about whether a bullet or a stick would quiet the noise faster. Arden was already there. He crossed the gully like night making up its mind and hit the first man with a force that was almost mercy. Quick, clean, ending the argument before it could spread to violence against the trapped wolf. The second swung his rifle toward the shadows. Rowan's spear flashed. The rifle went singing into trees. The third man, there is always a third man, rose from behind a cut stump with a long knife angling up toward Arden's ribs. Time widened for Lyra then, like a pupil in darkness. She saw the knife's cheap, nicked edge. She saw Arden's eyes shift from amber to a wild color that had no word. She saw his control hold and then bend. He did not fully change. He changed enough. The knife found skin and met something under it that was not willing to be pierced. Arden's hand closed over the man's wrist with certainty that spoke of storms barely leashed. The man dropped the blade and fell senseless with a crack to the temple. The young grey was making the high, unbelieving sound of a creature that had never imagined pain might be constant. Lyra slid to its side. "Easy," she murmured, voice steady by sheer will. "I know." Snare teeth had chewed the foreleg to swollen purple. She breathed through the smell of iron and fear, aware of Arden 2 paces away. The pack arrayed around them in a ring that faced both in and out. "Rowan," she said, already unpacking the satchel. "Leverage. 2 stout branches. And someone with steady hands." They worked together, Rowan wrenching the trap, Lyra easing the mangled leg free, both of them ignoring the pup's pain-maddened snaps. When the young wolf was splinted and sleeping against the drug of willow bark, Arden looked at the unconscious men. "What do you expect of your king?" he asked quietly. Lyra didn't pretend confusion. If they were hungry men who set steel because their children starve, mercy. If they serve reed because coin matters more than conscience, justice that teaches. He nodded once, as if her answer had settled scales he carried invisibly. "Bind them. Walk them to the keep. When Caelric asks whether I spilled blood where law could have sufficed, I would like to answer honestly." "You don't owe him honesty," Rowan muttered. "I owe myself it," Arden said. They marched back under snowfall that decided to be serious. Halfway home the wind shifted. The metallic sweetness returned, multiplied, older. From the trees something watched. Not wolves, not men. The air turned wrong like the east wing's torches. "Back," Arden said softly, and the pack moved as if the snow itself were a mouth. Lyra felt it see her, the nameless watcher, and felt it choose not to move. But choosing meant it had rules. Rules meant it would be back. At the keep, the world was simple again. Iron, flame, hands, voices. The captured men were taken below for questioning. The pup went to the infirmary, where Joss began fussing before remembering to act like he didn't care. Arden stood at the infirmary threshold, as if a line he could cross in battle were not one he crossed here easily. He looked at Lyra. She looked back longer than ruled to allowed. "You smelled the trap before most," he said. "I smelled the wrongness," she answered. "It tastes like copper under the tongue." He nodded, almost pleased. "You'll come when we run the borders again." Eloan bristled without moving. "She will. She will," Arden repeated, not unkindly, and Eloan inclined her head because some laws predate stone. After the pup slept, after the men were chained to their choices, Lyra stepped into the corridor and found Arden waiting where torchlight couldn't decide whether to claim his face. "What did you almost do?" he asked. "When you saw the knife?" "Move between it and you," she said truthfully, hearing how foolish it sounded only after the words were said aloud. A slow breath left him. "Don't." She lifted her chin. "You carried me up this mountain when I could not walk. You bought me from a life that had only worse endings. Don't ask me to be less brave than you were on a day I had nothing." "I am not asking you to be less brave," he said. "I am asking you to live long enough for your bravery to matter." Silence held the sentence so they could both see it from several angles. She felt the wolf in her, thin with old hunger, shy with old humiliation, press its head beneath that sentence like a creature discovering shade. "I will try," she said. "If you will try not to put your body between every blade meant for someone small." His mouth became a smile, brief and built for secrecy. "Deal." The thaw brought more than melting snow. It brought a messenger from the valley below, his face pale with more than exhaustion. "The fever," he gasped. "It spreads again. Children. We've lost 3 already." Lyra's heart squeezed. She gathered her satchel instinctively, but before anyone could object, Arden's voice cut through the murmurs. "Can you cure it?" "I can try," she said, voice steady despite the weight of expectation. Caelric's voice slid across the hall like oil on water. "Your Majesty, she is no pack physician. If she fails, the villagers will curse your name for sending a half-broken stray." Arden's gaze found his uncle, cold and precise. Better they curse me for trying than curse me for turning my back. The village clung to the river's bend. Houses hunched under mossy roofs. Inside, fever burned hot. Children lay sweating, their breaths shallow, while parents hovered helplessly. Lyra moved from cot to cot, brewing bitter tea, cooling foreheads, coaxing sips between cracked lips. Through the long night, Rowan stood guard while she worked. When dawn came, 2 children's fevers had broken. Their mothers wept with relief, but Lyra only shook her head. It was the herbs, not me. But when she looked up, she saw Arden in the doorway. He had come quietly without fanfare, and now watched with something in his eyes that made her wolf stir with recognition. On their return, Caelric intercepted her in the corridor. His smile was thin, calculated. A hero now, are you? Healing peasants while wolves whisper your name. I did what was needed. What was ordered, he corrected smoothly. Do not mistake his whim for your worth. He leaned close, his breath carrying that wrong scent of clove and ash. Arden is young. He lets sentiment guide him. One day that will destroy him. When it does, clever ones will survive. Foolish ones will fall with him. Lyra's pulse stuttered. And you would have me be clever? His eyes gleamed. When the time comes, I will ask something small of you. A word. Silence. A door left unlocked. In return, I promise your survival when Arden's storm finally breaks. She stepped back, her wolf bristling faintly within. I gave the Alpha my word. Caelric's smile only widened. Words are only air. Survival is blood. The threat hung between them like a blade, and Lyra understood that her choice, when it came, would shape more than just her own fate. That night brought no rest. Her wolf paced inside her, restless and thin but louder than before. Something drew her from her pallet, feet carrying her down corridors until she stood again before the east wing's arch. The torches guttered lower here, air pressed colder, metallic. She heard faint whispers, too faint to be language, too sharp to be wind. Don't! The voice shook her more than a shout. Arden stood behind her, cloak thrown hastily over broad shoulders, eyes burning in torchlight. She bowed her head. I couldn't sleep. Few who walk here ever sleep again, he said, weariness heavy in his voice. Go back. She wanted to ask what lay beyond. Instead, she whispered, Then why do you stay? Silence stretched, heavy with words unsaid. Because the shadows here, he said finally, are mine to guard, not yours. His hand brushed her arm. Not command, not possession, but something closer to warning wrapped in care. In that touch, she felt the weight he carried, the secrets that carved lines around his eyes. What's in there? She asked, because courage and curiosity had always been her weakness. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, remnants. Wolves who gave themselves to hunger and lost the rest of their souls. My father captured them, believing they could be cured. But no cure was ever found. They are what waits when a pack devours itself. The words hit her like ice water. And you keep them alive. As warnings, he said simply. Destroy them and we lose the lesson. Let them remain and we remember. Power without restraint becomes ruin. Understanding dawned. That's why Caelric wants them destroyed. Not for safety, for erasure. Arden's eyes sharpened. You understand more than most. His gaze held hers. That makes you dangerous. To him. Me. To yourself. The thaw was false. Winter returned with vengeance. Storms battering Blackthorn with sleet sharp enough to flay skin. In the great hall, the council met while fire blazed high but gave no warmth. Lyra attended because she had been summoned, standing to one side while tension crackled between uncle and nephew. "My lord-nephew spends gold on peasants who give nothing in return," Caelric said smoothly. "He squanders coin on stray healers. He lets mercy weaken our law. And now, even the mountain turns against us." Murmurs rippled through the room. Lyra saw doubt curling like smoke among the pack. Arden's jaw tightened. "The mountain storms as it always has. Blame weather if you must, but do not call mercy weakness." Caelric's smile was thin. "Then prove it. Open the east wing. Show them what your mercy protects." The hall went silent. Even the fire seemed to lean closer. "That place is sealed for a reason," Arden said. "Exactly," Caelric purred. "Let the pack see the reason. Or they will believe you keep secrets because you are afraid." Later, alone with his most trusted, Arden made his choice. "If the council doubts me, they will doubt you," he told Rowan. "If Caelric poisons the records, Mira will know. And if the keep itself bleeds tonight," his gaze fell on Lyra, "then a healer will be needed." They gathered at the east wing's arch at moonrise. The torches sputtered, flames dimming as though unwilling to bear witness. Arden pressed his palm to the iron door set deep in stone. Old runes flared faintly, glowing with silver fire. "Stay behind me," he said. The door opened onto narrow corridors lined with cells. Chains clinked faintly in the dark. Something moved inside the nearest cell, something too large to be fully wolf, too twisted to be fully man. Its eyes burned red, breath rattling like iron dragged across stone. When it lunged against the bars, the entire wall shook. "Gods," Rowan breathed. "They're still alive." "Not alive," Arden said grimly. "Bound." Caelric's voice rang out behind them as pack members pressed forward. "See, this is the mercy your king guards. Monsters chained in our walls, wasting resources, spreading fear. End them, Arden, or admit your mercy is cowardice." One creature struck the bars so hard they bent. Ern screamed. The lock burst. The thing surged free, half wolf, half nightmare. Warriors stumbled back. Caelric shouted, "Kill it before it kills us." Arden shifted mid-stride, his form blurring into silver wolf, massive and blazing with fury. He met the beast head-on, claws striking sparks. The clash shook the corridor, stone dust raining from the ceiling. For a moment, it seemed Arden might be overpowered. The creature's jaws closed on his shoulder, blood spraying. Without thinking, Lyra shouted, "Arden!" Her voice cracked through the chaos. The silver wolf surged, breaking free, slamming the beast against the wall. With a roar that was more storm than sound, Arden tore its throat out. The creature collapsed, dissolving into ash and shadow. Arden shifted back, blood dripping down his arm but unbowed. His eyes swept the crowd of pack members who had pressed forward to witness the confrontation. "This is what mercy guards," he said, his voice carrying despite his exhaustion. "Not monsters but warnings. A reminder of what we could become if hunger rules us. Kill them all and we erase the lesson. Leave them and we remember. Power without restraint becomes ruin." Caelric sneered. "You protect ruin and call it wisdom." Arden's gaze was steel. "I protect the pack from becoming this." He gestured to the ash that had been a creature moments before. "These remnants stay. Not out of mercy but out of necessity. And if any dare question their chains again, I will end them myself." His bloodied figure, fierce and unyielding, seared itself into every watching eye. The pack saw their alpha as he truly was. Not just powerful, but willing to bear the burden of terrible knowledge to keep them safe. Ceolric's smile faltered. This was not the outcome he had planned. The keep did not sleep after the east wing opened. Whispers traveled faster than wildfire. Some called Arden reckless for revealing the chained remnants. Others whispered of his strength, how he fought darkness and returned standing. But always, beneath it all, Ceolric's influence worked like poison in water. Lyra felt the shift in how people looked at her. The healer who had stood beside their alpha, who had called his name in the moment of greatest danger. Some saw courage. Others saw presumption. 3 days after the revelation, it came to a head. The great bell tolled, not for prayer, not for patrol, but for challenge. Lyra ran to the great hall with the rest, her heart already knowing what she would find. Ceolric stood in the center, surrounded by his supporters. His voice rang out clear and commanding. "This ends tonight. Arden has led us into weakness, showing mercy to peasants, chaining monsters instead of destroying them, letting an Omega stray whisper in his ear. He is no alpha. He is a boy clinging to his father's shadow." The hall erupted. Some demanded the duel, others begged restraint. But the law was older than stone. A challenge answered must be fought. Arden stood at the far end of the hall, still bearing bandages from the remnants' bite. "Challenge then," he said quietly. "If you believe yourself stronger, claim the mantle. The law will decide." They shifted almost as one. Where Arden became Silver Storm, bright and terrible, Ceolric became a wolf black as a cave mouth, eyes burning pale like ice fire. They circled while the pack pressed back against stone, breath held. The clash shook the hall. Claws against claws, teeth against hide. Arden struck first, driving Ceolric across the stones. But Ceolric was cunning. His strikes aimed to wound, not kill, to draw blood and sway the watching crowd. Each time Arden staggered, fear knifed through Lyra. Each time he surged back, hope roared louder. But then Ceolric fainted, jaws clamping Arden's foreleg. Blood sprayed. The silver wolf faltered. Gasps rose. "He's losing." Lyra's wolf screamed inside her. Thin, desperate, but real. She couldn't stand idle. Not again. She tore free of Rowan's grip and ran forward, heedless of law or fear. "Arden!" she cried. Their eyes met across the bloody stones. Something broke loose inside her, a heat that surged through her chest, wild and ancient. For the first time in her life, her wolf answered her call. Power poured into her limbs, trembling but fierce. She didn't shift fully. Her body wasn't ready, but her voice carried with the resonance of a wolf's howl. "Stand!" The silver wolf heaved against Ceolric's grip, breaking free with a snarl that shook the rafters. Strength burned through him like wildfire, fed by her call. He lunged, slamming Ceolric to the ground. Claws pinned throat, teeth bared. The hall went silent, waiting for the kill. But Arden did not finish it. He shifted back, looming over his uncle with blood and storm still dripping from him. "You crave power," he said, voice hoarse. "I crave only that our people survive. You are my blood, Ceolric. But if you rise against me again, I will end you." He motioned. Rowan's warriors dragged Ceolric away, snarling but defeated. When the hall emptied, when the torches guttered low, Arden found Lyra where she leaned against a pillar, her wolf still trembling inside her like a newborn flame. "You called to me," he said. "I shouldn't have," she whispered. "It was against the law, against tradition." His gaze softened. "You saved me. Not by breaking law, but by reminding me why I fight." Lyra's breath shook. "My wolf came back. For you." He reached for her hand, rough palm closing over hers. Not for me. For yourself. But I am glad it chose now. For a heartbeat, silence held them. Full, not empty. Then his forehead touched hers. A gesture more intimate than any claim. The days that followed brought change. Caelric's supporters melted away like snow in spring. The pack watched Lyra with new eyes. Not as property, but as the one who had stood in their greatest hour and helped their alpha rise. Her wolf grew stronger daily, voice no longer faint but learning, remembering what it meant to belong. But peace was an illusion. Reed, the name whispered in corners for months, finally showed his hand. It began with fire. Smoke rising from the valley settlements. Too much and too fast to be accidental. Then came the refugees, streaming up the mountain paths with terror bright in their eyes. "He's taken the villages," a soot-stained messenger gasped. "Reed and his mercenaries. Says he'll burn everything between here and the river unless the Wolf King comes down to face him." Arden's jaw tightened. "How many?" "3 dozen armed men, maybe more. And, my lord." The messenger swallowed hard. "He has prisoners. Children from the settlements. Says they'll burn with the rest if you don't come alone." The war room filled with grim faces. Maps spread across the table, marked with red ink. Reed's positions, the burning villages, the narrow paths that could serve as ambush points. "It's a trap," Rowan stated flatly. "He wants you separated from the pack." "Of course it's a trap," Arden replied. "But those are our people down there. Children who trust us to protect them." Lyra studied the maps, her healer's training making her see patterns others missed. "He's not just trying to kill you," she said slowly. "He's trying to break the bond between the pack and the humans. Make them fear you're too weak to protect them, or too dangerous to be trusted." Arden's eyes sharpened. "Explain." "If you don't go, he burns innocents and tells everyone you abandoned them. If you do go and die, the pack falls apart. If you go and win but have to reveal your true nature to save them." She met his gaze. "Then he's made you into the monster the humans fear most." The room went quiet as the implications settled in. "So what do you suggest?" Arden asked. Lyra's wolf stirred, offering strength she was still learning to trust. "We don't play his game. We changed the rules." They went in wolf form until the tree line, then shifted back to approach the burning settlement on 2 legs. Arden, Rowan, and a dozen of the pack's best warriors moved like shadows through the smoke-hazed valley. Lyra went with them. Despite every argument, every plea for her to stay safe within the keep's walls, she had convinced Arden that a healer would be needed, not just for his warriors, but for the prisoners they meant to free. Her growing wolf strength made her faster now, able to keep pace even if she couldn't match their supernatural endurance. Reed had chosen his ground well. The settlement's main square had been turned into a killing ground, with prisoners, mostly children and elderly, huddled in the center while armed men formed a perimeter. Buildings burned in controlled fires, creating walls of flame that would trap any rescue attempt. From their hidden position in the ruins of the blacksmith's shop, they could see Reed himself. A tall man with graying hair and the bearing of someone who'd once worn a uniform, now dressed in mismatched armor and carrying himself like a king of ashes. "Arden Vaelor." Reed's voice carried across the square. "I know you're here. Come out and face justice for the crimes of your bloodline." "Crimes?" Rowan muttered. "What's he talking about?" But Lyra saw understanding dawn in Arden's eyes, and something that might have been old guilt. "My father," Arden said quietly. "When the territorial wars ended, some of Reed's mercenary company were accused of war crimes. My father had them executed without trial. The pieces fell into place. This wasn't just about territory or power. It was about revenge, years in the making. Reed continued his shouting. The wolf tyrant's son hides while innocents burn. Where's the courage your propaganda claims? Where's the strength that makes peasants bow and scrape? Arden moved to stand, but Lyra caught his arm. Wait. Listen to what he's not saying. They strained to hear. Beneath Reed's shouting there were other voices. His men talking among themselves. And what Lyra heard made her blood run cold. Won't matter once the real fire starts. Just keep them talking until the charges are set. Whole square will go up, wolves and all. He's planning to kill everyone, she breathed. Prisoners, us, his own men if necessary. This was never about justice. It's about making sure no one survives to tell a different story. Arden's eyes went winter cold. Then we end it. Now. The battle was swift and brutal. The pack moved like wolves given human cunning, striking from multiple directions while Reed's men were focused on the square's center. But Reed had planned for supernatural opponents, silver weapons, blessed ammunition, traps designed to wound rather than kill cleanly. The fighting was fierce, and Lyra found herself pressed into service not just as healer but as combatant. Her growing wolf strength let her move faster than human reflexes could follow, and more than once she found herself standing over wounded allies with Reed's men bearing down. Reed himself proved why he'd survived years as a mercenary leader. When cornered, he fought with the desperate fury of someone who had nothing left to lose. His blade found Arden twice before the Alpha could pin him down, once across the ribs, once along the thigh, both wounds bleeding freely. You want to know the truth. Reed snarled as Arden's claws pressed against his throat. Your father didn't execute war criminals. He executed men who'd learned too much about what you monsters really are. Men who'd seen your kind feed on human flesh and wanted the world to know. Lyra felt the lie in his words. Not the accusation about Arden's father, but something deeper. Reed believed what he was saying, but his belief was built on half-truths and twisted memories. My father was many things, Arden said quietly, not denying the charge but not accepting it either. But he never fed on innocence. None of us do. Lies, Reed spat. I've seen the bodies. I've tracked your hunts. The missing travelers, the savaged corpses. The remnants, Lyra interrupted, understanding flooding through her. You've been tracking the remnants' kills. The creatures in the East Wing, they break free sometimes, don't they? And you've been blaming the pack for what the monsters do. Reed's face went white. You have monsters. The admission changed everything. Reed's men, listening from where they'd been captured or had surrendered, began to understand that their leader had been chasing shadows built from half-glimpsed truths and old grief. But the prisoners were still in danger. The fires were still burning. And somewhere in the smoke and chaos, Lyra realized that Kaelric was missing from his confinement back at the keep. Arden, she said urgently. Where's your uncle? The Alpha's head snapped up, nostrils flaring as he tested the wind. His face went grim. Gone. And I smell silver and iron moving through the smoke. The trap within a trap was springing closed. Kaelric emerged from the smoke like a nightmare given form. No longer the refined court manipulator. He wore wolf shape twisted by something darker, fur that seemed to drink light, eyes that burned with borrowed fire. The remnant's corruption, Lyra realized. Somehow he had not just freed himself, but bargained with the creatures in the East Wing. Nephew. His voice carried clearly despite the wolf form, an unnatural sound that made everyone in the square flinch. Still playing hero to the humans. Still pretending mercy makes you strong. Behind him came shapes that should not exist. Remnants but changed, directed, their mindless hunger given purpose by Caelric's will. The prisoners screamed and huddled closer together. Reed stared in horror. What are those things? The truth you were seeking, Caelric laughed, a sound like breaking glass. These are what wolves become when they embrace their true nature. When they stop pretending to be civilized. Arden rose from where he'd been crouched over Reed. His wounds still bleeding but his stance strong. You made a pact with them. I freed them from your father's chains. In return, they offered me what you never could. Power without the weakness of conscience. Caelric's corrupted form began to shift, becoming larger, more monstrous. Tonight, the humans learn what they should truly fear. And when they're gone, the pack will follow a stronger alpha. The remnants spread out, cutting off escape routes. Reed's surviving men found themselves fighting alongside the pack, common humanity overriding old hatreds in the face of true monsters. But it was Lyra who saw the real danger. The children, the elderly prisoners. They were positioned exactly where Caelric's creatures would reach them first. This wasn't just about power or revenge. It was about forcing Arden to choose between saving innocents and protecting his own people. He's making you decide, she called to Arden over the sounds of battle. Save us or save them. Either choice destroys what you've built. Arden's eyes met hers across the burning square. In them, she saw not despair but determination. Then I choose both. He shifted but not into wolf form. Instead, something between human enough to speak, wolf enough for supernatural strength and speed. The partial transformation was dangerous, potentially fatal if held too long, but it let him coordinate the defense while matching the remnants in human abilities. Rowan! Get the prisoners to the stone walls, defensible position, he commanded. Sable, Kerr with him. Everyone else, form a circle. Don't let them split us apart. The battle became a grinding siege. The pack and Reed's men fought side by side, protecting the huddled civilians while Caelric's monsters pressed closer. But Lyra could see the toll it was taking. Arden's partial shift was burning through his strength like fever. His wounds bled more freely, and each command came with visible effort. Her wolf was stronger now, but still not enough for full transformation. But perhaps, Mira taught me about labels, she muttered, pulling healing supplies from her satchel even as she dodged a remnant's claws. Maybe wolves have labels too. What Lyra did next went against every instinct she'd been taught. Instead of trying to become more wolf, she embraced what made her different. Her healing abilities weren't separate from her wolf nature. They were part of it. She was pack not because she could hunt and fight, but because she could heal and protect. The realization changed everything. Her partial shift was nothing like Arden's battle form. Instead of claws and fangs, her senses sharpened until she could smell the corruption in Caelric's creatures, could hear the labored breathing of every wounded ally, could feel the fear radiating from the trapped civilians. "Joss!" she called, knowing somehow that he would hear her across the square. "Silver nitrate and wolfsbane. Mix them with the lamp oil." The young healer didn't question, just obeyed. Soon, makeshift weapons were being passed among Reed's men, blades and arrows coated with substances that would burn remnant flesh like acid. But the real battle was between alphas. Caelric, swollen with borrowed power, stalked toward Arden with the confidence of someone who believed victory was inevitable. "You're weakening, nephew. That form will kill you before you can kill me." "Maybe," Arden admitted, his voice strained but steady. "But it doesn't have to kill you. Just hold you long enough." "Long enough for what?" Lyra stepped forward, her healer's satchel in one hand, a vial of something that glowed faintly silver in the other. Long enough for me to cure them. Kael'ric laughed. You can't cure corruption, little Omega. I've seen what remains when hunger devours the soul. You're right, she agreed. I can't cure corruption, but I can cure the hunger that feeds it. The vial in her hand contained something she'd been working on since first seeing the remnants, a mixture of herbs and silver that wouldn't destroy the creatures, but would satisfy their supernatural hunger long enough for their fractured minds to remember what they'd once been. She threw the vial at the nearest remnant. It shattered against the creature's chest, and the effect was immediate. The mindless fury faded from its eyes, replaced by confusion, then dawning horror at what it had become. No, Kael'ric snarled. They chose this. They chose power over weakness. They chose hunger over starvation, Lyra corrected. But no one should have to make that choice. One by one, she treated the remnants. Not all of them could be saved. Some had been lost too long, their humanity too deeply buried. But enough recovered their minds to turn against their corruptor. Kael'ric found himself facing not just his nephew, but the very creatures he'd thought to command. In the end, he died as he had lived, alone, abandoned by those he'd tried to use. Dawn came gray and cold, but it came. The square was quiet except for the crackle of dying fires and the soft sounds of healing. Bandages being wrapped, wounds being cleaned, survivors being comforted. Reed sat against the well's stone wall, staring at nothing. The hatred that had driven him for years was gone, replaced by something that might eventually become understanding. I was wrong, he said finally. About your father. About you. Arden, back in human form and heavily bandaged, nodded wearily. You were wrong about some things. Right about others. My father did make hard choices. Some of them were mistakes. And you. I'm trying to make better ones. Lyra moved among the wounded, her enhanced senses letting her prioritize care with supernatural precision. Her wolf was fully awake now, but it was a healer's wolf, focused not on the hunt but on the pack's well-being. Several of Reed's men asked to stay, to serve a leader who'd fought beside them rather than command from safety. A few of the recovered remnants begged for death, unable to live with memories of what they'd done. Others asked for the chance to make amends. What happens now? One of the village elders asked. Arden looked out over the valley, where smoke still rose from damaged buildings but people were already beginning to rebuild. Now we do what we've always done. We survive. We protect. We try to be better than our mistakes. Lyra found him later, standing on a rise overlooking the valley. The bandages were already stained with fresh blood. He'd pushed himself too hard as always. You need rest, she said. I need many things. He smiled, the expression tired but genuine. But rest can wait. There's too much to rebuild. Then let others help with the rebuilding. She stepped closer, her hand finding his. You don't have to carry everything alone. He squeezed her fingers gently. I'm still learning that lesson. Below them, the valley spread wide and green despite the scars of recent battle. Smoke rose from chimneys now instead of funeral pyres. Children's laughter carried on the wind. The keep has seen too much blood, Arden said quietly. I would see it no peace. With mercy, she asked. His hand brushed hers, warm and sure. With you. #epilogue, the healer's song. Months later, when the wounds had healed and the stories had been told, Lyra stood once again on the parapets of Blackthorn Keep. But now she stood not as property or servant, but as healer, as pack, as the one who had helped their alpha remember that strength and mercy were not opposites. Her ledger lay open beside her, no longer a record of supplies and treatments, but of a life rebuilt from nothing. The last entry read, Asterisk today. A merchant asked if I was the healer who'd cured the remnants. When I said yes, he asked if I would teach his daughter the art. I said I would if she has the calling for it. We are always in need of those who can mend what is broken. Asterisk. Stock high. Hope, purpose, wolves who remember they are more than their hunger. Stock infinite. The possibility of tomorrow being better than yesterday. The wind carried her scent across the mountain, mingling with Arden's, twining them together like threads in a tapestry. The keep sighed around them, stone walls that had witnessed too much darkness finally learning to hold light again. And when the moon rose full and bright, calling to the wolf in every heart, the pack ran together through forests that remembered joy. Lyra ran among them, healer and wolf, omega and alpha, broken and whole. She had been bought as property. She had survived as a servant. But she lived now as herself, Lyra Morningsong, whose voice could call strength from those who had forgotten they possessed it, whose hands could heal what others had given up as lost. In the end, that was enough. It was everything,